Hey guys, tonight we're rewinding history so far back that Egypt doesn't even have Egypt yet. There are no pyramids, no pharaohs, no tourists with selfie sticks pretending to touch the top. Tonight we're visiting the mysterious world before the pharaohs, when the Nile Valley was still figuring out what a civilization even was. This is Egypt before gold, before gods, and before the invention of eyeliner that could survive a sandstorm. The air is hot, the river smells like life and decay in equal measure, and you, lucky you, are about to become one of the world's first almost Egyptians. Before we start, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and whether your cat has claimed your pillow yet. Now dim those lights. Switch on a fan for that gentle ancient breeze over mud huts effect. Get comfortable, because tonight, we're not building pyramids, we're building the idea of building pyramids. But before you drift off, let's ask a few questions. Who came before the pharaohs? Who built the first walls beside the Nile when most people still lived in huts that melted in the rain? What did they eat before farming existed? And what happened when hippos didn't feel like sharing the river? Did they already have religion? Or did they just panic every time it thundered? And how did a bunch of mud-loving farmers accidentally kickstart one of the most advanced civilizations on Earth? Congratulations. You've just woken up in about 6000 BCE. Give or take a few centuries, because, calendars aren't a thing yet. You're standing barefoot on the bank of the Nile. The floodwaters are retreating. The air is warm. The insects are plotting. And somewhere nearby, someone's trying to invent bread by accident. Welcome to before the pharaohs, the unknown builders of the Nile. The Nile isn't just a river. It's a cosmic metronome. Every year it floods. Every year it withdraws. And every year people panic, then celebrate. Then panic again. The rhythm of this river is so predictable, it practically invents the concept of calendar. For you, it's not just water, it's destiny, with a splash zone. You wake up to the sound of frogs and the smell of wet earth, two clear signs that your world is about to be rearranged. Overnight, the Nile has begun its annual rebellion. Water spills over its banks, swallowing fields and footpaths alike. The horizon becomes a shimmering blur of green and gold, a mirror of the sky. You squint at it, half in awe, half in frustration, because your entire grain store is now an enthusiastic participant in the flood. But you're not alone. All along the riverbank, people stand watching, muttering prayers and excuses. The elders call it Iteru, the divine flood, the yearly breath of the gods. You, however, call it Tuesday. It happens every year, and yet somehow, it always catches everyone by surprise. The Nile doesn't care about your schedule. It is the schedule. Still, you can't stay mad at it. When the waters retreat, they leave behind something miraculous, a thick, dark silt that smells like life itself. You scoop a handful, feeling it squish between your fingers. This is your real wealth. Forget gold or cattle. This mud is currency. You spread it on your fields, plant your seeds, and whisper small bribes to the sky to behave this season. The air hums with insects, the promise of harvest, and the faint sound of your neighbor swearing because his fishing net just got eaten by a crocodile. You pretend not to notice. Crocodiles are sacred, which is another way of saying, don't question why nobody's doing anything about them. At night, when the floodplain glows silver under the moon, you understand why your ancestors thought this river was divine. It moves like a living creature, slow, deliberate, and deeply passive-aggressive. It brings life, but it also reminds you how easily that life can be taken away. You start noticing patterns. The stars above change as the waters rise and fall. Certain constellations, bright dots of stubborn light, appear just before the flood. You and your neighbors begin marking their arrival on bones and sticks. You've just invented the calendar, though you think of it more as a flood warning system. There's something hypnotic about the way time itself seems to pulse with the river. The months don't mean much. They're just waiting rooms between floods. You measure life in harvests and drownings, in the seasons when fish are plenty and when mosquitoes are planning your funeral. You find yourself developing rituals, not out of faith, but out of fear and routine. You place small offerings at the water's edge, reeds, food, a clay figurine shaped vaguely like a hippo, which you hope the gods understand is symbolic. You don't know who you're praying to yet, but you're pretty sure they're watching or laughing. Then one morning, the flood doesn't come on time. The sun rises, the ground stays dry, and everyone starts panicking. You check the stars, the mud, the frogs, all silent. This has never happened before. You wonder if the gods have overslept. The elders gather, mumbling theories that range from "we offended the river" to "maybe the moon is broken." Eventually, the waters arrive, late, messy, and twice as destructive. You rebuild, muttering that maybe next year will be better. It won't be. And yet, despite it all, you love this river. You depend on it, worship it, curse it, and thank it in the same breath. Without it, you'd still be wandering the desert, arguing over which cactus looks most edible. With it, you have fields, fish, and the faint illusion of control. As you fall asleep to the croaking chorus of the floodplain, you realize something profound. The Nile isn't just a river. It's time itself, flowing endlessly, marking your days, your harvests, your life. Every ripple, every tide, every flood, it all becomes history, written not in ink or stone, but in water and mud. The pharaohs will one day claim to rule by divine right. But the truth is, the Nile was king long before any crown. And tonight, under its watchful stars, you're just another subject waiting for tomorrow's tide. Before the desert was sand, it was paradise. Elephants grazed, giraffes wandered, and your ancestors probably had the worst sunburns of prehistory. Then the rains stopped, and you, along with everyone else, packed up and followed the last muddy trickle east. You didn't plan on inventing Egypt. You were just thirsty. You stand at the edge of a lake that shouldn't exist, a shimmering bowl of turquoise cradled by grasslands that stretch to the horizon. The air hums with life. Dragonflies flicker like jewels, and herds of antelope ripple across the plain like living rivers. You could almost forget that you're technically in what future generations will call the Sahara. Right now, it's lush, green, and full of animals that could flatten you before breakfast. It's a good life, mostly. There's plenty of food, plenty of water, and just enough danger to keep things interesting. You and your tribe hunt with stone-tipped spears, trade gossip under acacia trees, and paint pictures on rock walls that future archaeologists will later call symbolic, even though you're mostly drawing stick figures and cows. But paradise has an expiration date. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the rains start to fade, the grass yellows, the rivers shrink. That great blue lake you admired last season now looks suspiciously like a mud pancake. You tell yourself it's temporary. It's not. Year after year, the world dries out, the herds move south, the birds stop returning. The air becomes hotter, sharper, less forgiving. Dust storms sweep across the horizon like divine warnings. Your once green world is turning to sand, and you can feel the land giving up. You start walking east, not because you want to, but because every instinct tells you that water lives in that direction. You follow the stars, the sun, and the smell of rain that never comes. The journey isn't heroic. It's hot, endless, and full of arguments about who forgot the last water skin. You lose a few people along the way, not to war or beasts, but to the simple cruelty of dehydration. The desert doesn't shout when it kills. It just takes. Some nights, you camp under skies so clear they almost hurt to look at. The Milky Way stretches like spilled milk across the heavens, and you realize, for the first time, how small you are. The old shamans whisper that the gods have turned away, that the world itself is dying. But you, sweaty and stubborn, keep moving. You're not looking for gods, you're looking for shade. Eventually you stumble upon a ribbon of water. Narrow, shimmering, alive. The Nile. It's not the mighty river it will become, but to you, it's a miracle. You drop to your knees and drink greedily, mud and all. Around you, others do the same. You've found salvation, and you're not alone. Other groups have arrived, wanderers from the west and south, all drawn by the same rumor of eternal water. You start to build. At first, it's just shelters of reeds and mud, temporary like everything else in your life. But the floods come, retreat, and come again, and you realize the river has a rhythm. You learn to predict it, plant near it, live with it. The Nile doesn't just give you water, it gives you time. For the first time in history, you can plan something beyond tomorrow. You adapt, your diet shifts from roasted antelope to fish and barley. You trade nomadic uncertainty for predictable struggle. Sure, there are crocodiles now, enormous, smug ones, but at least you're not dying of thirst. The days of endless wandering are over. You've become part of something larger, a community shaped by the river's pulse, bound by shared memory of the green paradise you left behind. And yet, even as you settle, part of you still dreams of the old Sahara. The rain, the forests, the scent of wet grass. You tell stories of it to your children, describing a land so fertile, it sounds like fantasy. They listen wide-eyed, surrounded by sand, thinking you must be exaggerating. Maybe you are. Maybe that's how all myths begin, with nostalgia and a dash of dehydration. Centuries later, the wind will erase nearly every trace of your old world. The lakes will vanish, the animals will migrate, and the rocks will remember what you carved into them long after your bones are dust. But your journey east will ripple through time. It will give birth to a civilization, a river culture that measures eternity in floods and monuments. You didn't set out to create Egypt. You were just following the last puddle that didn't hate you. But in doing so, you laid the first footprints toward one of the greatest civilizations on Earth. And somewhere beneath the dunes of the modern Sahara, the bones of your ancestors still rest, facing east toward the river that saved you, waiting for rain that will never come. Your home is handcrafted, biodegradable, and collapses seasonally. Basically, the original eco-lodge. The walls are made of mud, straw, and optimism. There's no front door because doors haven't been invented yet, and the interior design theme is earth tones and panic. Welcome to prehistoric home ownership, where every structure comes with free ventilation, and the phrase, open concept living, isn't a design choice. It's an unavoidable problem. Your hut squats on the riverbank, like a loaf of bread that's given up. It's cozy, if you define cozy as slightly damp and full of bugs. When the wind blows, the whole wall sighs in solidarity. When it rains, your living room slowly turns back into the raw materials it came from. You live with your family, parents, siblings, maybe a goat or two that are only technically livestock. Everyone's job title is stay alive. You don't have furniture, but you do have multi-purpose objects, baskets for storage, sleeping, and occasionally as emergency helmets when something small and angry falls from the thatch roof. The floor is compacted mud, cool under your bare feet. It smells faintly of earth and smoke, the universal perfume of early civilization. Every morning, sunlight creeps through a hole in the wall that you optimistically refer to as a window. It illuminates the interior in a shade best described as dust. You start your day by patching cracks with fresh mud. It's a meditative process. Scoop, smear, swear. Every repair feels like a silent prayer to gravity to please take the day off. Your neighbor's hut collapsed last week after a goat leaned on it too hard, so you're trying to stay proactive. Architecture, you realize, is just the art of pretending nature won't win. The smell of cooking drifts in from the next hut. Roasted grain, a little fish, and a hint of despair. You don't have a stove, just a clay fire pit and a lifelong commitment to smoke inhalation. The roof doubles as a skylight whenever it catches fire, which happens more often than you'd like. Despite all that, the mud hut has its charm. It's warm in winter, cool in summer, and if you don't like the layout, you can remodel the entire thing with a bucket of water and an existential crisis. Sustainability isn't a philosophy here, it's the law of survival. Everything you use, from reeds to clay to thatch, comes from within walking distance. You're a zero-waste influencer, 8,000 years ahead of schedule. Sometimes, when the floodwaters rise, you wonder if building next to the Nile was such a brilliant idea. You wake up to find the river trying to join you in bed. The walls bubble like bread dough, and everyone scrambles to move baskets, food, and babies to higher ground. The moment the water recedes, you repair, rebuild, and pretend this year will be different. It never is. Your neighbors stop by often, not because they like you, but because walls made of mud don't block sound. Privacy is a concept for future generations. Conversations, arguments, and whatever passes for romance are public events. You've learned to sleep through the sounds of babies crying, goats sneezing, and someone loudly losing an argument with their in-laws. At night, you sit outside by the fire, staring at the stars reflected in the black sheen of the river. The hut looms behind you, its crooked silhouette glowing faintly in the firelight. It's not much, but it's home. Inside are tools you made with your own hands, food you grew, and people you occasionally tolerate. You think about how every brick of your world comes from the same mud beneath your feet, and that someday you'll go back into it too. Still, you can't help feeling proud. You're one of the first humans to stop wandering, to claim a patch of earth and say, "This is mine." You've traded the open horizon for 4 walls and a roof that leaks like a confession. But you've built stability, however squishy it may be. Tomorrow you'll wake, scrape new mud from the riverbank, and rebuild whatever the night or the goats destroyed. You'll sigh, swear, and laugh through it, because that's what survival is. Stubbornness, with a side of humor. And as the dawn spills into your lopsided doorway, painting the walls gold for just a moment, you'll realize that civilization, in all its cracked, muddy glory, begins right here, in a hut that shouldn't stand, but somehow does. It's morning. The air smells like fish, smoke, and damp grain. Your breakfast is something halfway between porridge and regret. You've just invented the world's first balanced diet, which means you're equally likely to get nutrients or food poisoning. Either way, it's fuel for farming. The sun creeps over the horizon, painting the river in streaks of gold and brown, like a celestial reminder that coffee hasn't been invented yet. You stretch, scratch, and sit by the fire pit, where yesterday's stew has reincarnated as this morning's sludge. You stare at it with suspicion. It stares back, thick, bubbling, and vaguely sentient. You eat it anyway because breakfast isn't about enjoyment. It's about survival with a side of resignation. Your meal is a creative collaboration between barley, water, and the concept of giving up. It's technically food, though chewable paste might be more accurate. You scoop it up with your hands, utensils are still centuries away, and tell yourself it's hearty. The truth is, it's a crime against texture. Around you, the village is waking. Smoke drifts lazily from neighboring huts. Children cry because someone ate their half of the fish again, and a goat loudly informs everyone that it is, in fact, still alive. You can tell who's up by smell alone. Each household gives off its own signature aroma of burnt grain, wet ash, and unearned confidence. Let's be honest, breakfast in 6000 BCE is a group effort in disappointment. There's no bread, no butter, no honey, unless you feel like wrestling a beehive. You've got grain mush, roasted fish, and maybe, if you're lucky, a handful of figs that didn't fall in the mud. You take a bite and instantly remember why ancient people invented religion. Because every meal feels like a test from above. Sometimes you mix things up. Literally, fermented barley. That's beer. Congratulations. You've accidentally invented brunch. You sip the cloudy liquid and pretend it's sophisticated. Though deep down, you know it's just slightly rotten cereal water. But it helps. Everything feels more poetic when you're mildly tipsy before sunrise. Your friend across the fire is attempting to roast a fish on a stick that's also on fire. He calls it innovation. You call it smoke inhalation. The two of you eat in silence, watching the river shimmer. Birds swoop low, crocodiles lurk higher than you'd prefer, and the mosquitoes form a cloud thick enough to be considered a deity. It's peaceful, in a masochistic way. Then comes the crunch, a sound no porridge should ever make. You look down to discover a small pebble in your bowl. You don't spit it out, you chew carefully. The idea of dental care won't exist for another few thousand years, and you'd like to keep what's left of your teeth. You remind yourself this is all temporary. Someday, someone will invent bread, and breakfast will finally be civilized. Until then, you suffer nobly. Children chase each other near the riverbank, shouting about whose turn it is to fetch water, while the adults argue about whether it's too early to start drinking again. One of the elders insists that a morning beer keeps away the evil spirits. You nod in agreement, because evil spirits sound suspiciously like hangovers. Breakfast is also the village news hour. Who lost their fishing net? Who saw strange lights in the sky? Who found footprints that might be gods, or more likely goats? Every rumor is served with a side of barley paste and skepticism. Information spreads faster than hygiene. By mid-morning, the heat thickens. The smell of smoke, sweat, and cooked grain mingles into something that would make modern air freshener companies weep. You wipe your hands on your tunic, which is mostly decorative mud at this point, and stand up to face another day of farming, hauling, and pretending you understand irrigation. You glance back at your bowl, now empty, except for one heroic fly, and sigh. Breakfast has done its job. You're full, in the sense that there's no more room for regret. You look around at the other villagers, all doing the same ritual of eating, squinting, and silently judging each other's cooking. It's communal, grounding, and mildly traumatic. Everything a shared meal should be. Later, when you're knee-deep in river mud, trying not to drown while planting barley, you'll think back to that breakfast, not fondly, but with the resigned affection of someone who's accepted their place in the food chain, somewhere between fish and fungus. And as the sun climbs higher, burning away the morning mist, you realize that this, the smoke, the grain, the unintentional beer, is civilization beginning to simmer. It's not glamorous, it's not delicious, but it's dependable. Every bowl of mush is a promise that you'll wake up tomorrow, do it all again, and keep the river-fed heartbeat of life going. So you raise your half-empty gourd of proto-beer in a silent toast to the future, to bread, to butter, and to whatever genius will someday figure out bacon. For now you've got porridge, patience, and just enough sarcasm to survive another morning before history remembers to season the food. You bend over the soil, planting grain in the dark mud left by the floods. The work is backbreaking, repetitive, and mosquito-sponsored, but something incredible is happening. You're learning that food can be planned. The Nile becomes your boss, your supplier, and your unpredictable landlord all at once. The air is thick with humidity and hope. You stand ankle-deep in mud, pressing barley seeds into the earth with your hands, because tools, apparently, are a luxury for future generations. The sun isn't even fully up yet, but it's already trying to murder you. Every bead of sweat that rolls down your back is both a badge of honor and a personal betrayal. This is what progress looks like: dirt under your nails, mud between your toes, and a cloud of insects forming what can only be described as a living insult above your head. You slap at them and miss because they are immortal. You've never met an insect that respects personal space. Still, there's something deeply satisfying about it all. You're not chasing animals anymore or relying on whether the river feels like giving you fish. You're making food happen. You've hacked the code of nature. Sure, it's tedious, exhausting, and occasionally life-threatening, but for the first time in human history, your stomach has a schedule. You glance over at your neighbors, other brave souls bent double, moving rhythmically through the fields. It's a strange sort of choreography. Planting, swatting, sighing. The village chief walks by, hands on hips, pretending to supervise, but mostly just avoiding work. He calls it management. You call it standing in the shade. When you finally straighten your back, you look out over the floodplain. It stretches endlessly, glistening under the morning light. The smell of wet earth and rotting vegetation mingles with smoke from nearby fires. It's the scent of civilization under construction, equal parts promise and decay. By midday, the heat becomes unbearable. You tie reeds around your forehead to keep the sweat out of your eyes, though it mostly serves as a fashion statement no one asked for. The mosquitoes are relentless, the mud is heavy, and you begin to wonder whether this farming thing is really an upgrade from hunting. At least when you hunted, you got to nap in between failures. Still, the rewards are undeniable. A few months later, when the first green shoots appear, something stirs inside you. Pride, maybe, relief, or just the realization that you no longer have to eat your emergency stash of dried fish that tastes like regret. You watch the grain sway in the wind and realize you've done something miraculous. You've convinced nature to cooperate. Kind of. Farming brings new problems, of course. You now have possessions, and when people have possessions, they immediately invent theft. You build fences out of reeds, which work beautifully against rabbits, and absolutely not at all against humans. You start sleeping lighter, listening for suspicious splashing near your field at night. Congratulations, you've just invented anxiety. Then there's the harvest itself. You cut the stalks with flint blades, binding them in sheaves. The air fills with the sweet, dusty scent of grain and sweat. Your back screams in protest. Your hands blister. And every time you drop a bundle, someone yells, "Careful!" Like that helps. But when the last stalk falls and the granary fills, it feels like victory. A small one, sure, but victory nonetheless. The community celebrates. Someone brews beer, the answer to every problem from blisters to existential dread, and the whole village gathers by the fire. You drink, laugh, and ignore the fact that your future depends entirely on the river not deciding to evaporate next year. Farming, you realize, is just gambling with dirt. As night falls, you sit on the edge of the fields, staring at the moon reflecting in the irrigation canals. The land hums softly with life, frogs croaking, reeds rustling, insects buzzing in the dark. You feel small, but connected. The Nile's rhythm has become your heartbeat. It floods, retreats, feeds, and demands. You serve it, fear it, and love it all the same. You lie back in the grass, staring at the stars, wondering what your ancestors would think of you now. They'd probably say you're crazy for working this hard when there are perfectly good berries in the woods, but they didn't have granaries or beer or the smug satisfaction of telling other people, "No thanks, I grow my own food." And so, as the night breeze cools your blistered hands, you smile, not because the work is easy, but because it means something. You've traded wandering for waiting, chaos for cycles, and risk for rhythm. Tomorrow, you'll wake up, check the water, and start again. The Nile will rise and fall, your crops will live and die, and somehow, you'll keep going. It's the start of everything. Farming, surplus, cities, history, all from a few seeds pressed into mud and watered with sweat, hope, and a generous dose of sarcasm. You don't know it yet, but your back-breaking labor is laying the foundation for pharaohs, pyramids, and eventually breakfast cereal. Civilization starts here, with dirt under your nails and the quiet satisfaction of knowing you've tamed the flood. Water isn't safe, so you ferment it. Accidentally, you've created beer, the world's first health drink. It's murky, warm, and vaguely suspicious, but it beats dehydration. Congratulations, you've invented happy hour, social bonding, and hangovers in one go. It all begins, like most great human discoveries, with desperation and poor hygiene. The Nile is a miracle. It feeds you, waters your crops, and occasionally tries to kill you. But the water itself, questionable at best, fatal at worst. You notice a pattern: drink from the river, spend the next day regretting all your life choices. So someone somewhere gets an idea. What if you just let the water sit for a while? Maybe it'll fix itself. Spoiler, it doesn't. It ferments. But instead of killing you, it makes you feel funny, light, happy, invincible. You call it the good water. Civilization calls it beer. At first, you have no idea what you've done. You leave a pot of soggy grain in the sun, forget about it, and when you finally remember, it's bubbling and smells faintly of optimism. You taste it cautiously, wince, and wait to die. Instead, you feel warm, talkative, charismatic. Suddenly you love everyone, even your neighbor who steals your barley, especially your neighbor who steals your barley. You pour him a bowl. Congratulations, you've just invented the first bar tab. Word spreads fast. Villagers start accidentally leaving their grain out too. Soon, there's an entire subculture of people whose main contribution to society is finding excuses to drink. Someone suggests calling it a sacred ritual to make it sound productive. The priests agree because they're the biggest drinkers of all. Religion and alcohol form a partnership that will never die. The process of brewing becomes a craft, a mysterious, slightly sticky art passed down through generations. You mash grain, add water, stir, wait, and pray. There are no measurements, only vibes. Sometimes it tastes like heaven, other times like punishment. You never quite know which one you're getting until it's too late. But either way, it's safer than the river. Beer quickly becomes currency. You trade it, gift it, and occasionally weaponize it at social events. The chief uses it to reward workers, bribe priests, and calm small rebellions. Nothing diffuses tension like a communal hangover. Even the gods, you decide, must enjoy a good brew. After all, who else could have made you this brilliant by accident? The evenings change. Instead of collapsing in silence after a long day of farming, people gather around fires with bowls of frothy liquid and slightly unhinged energy. Someone tells a story, a long, winding tale about gods and floods, and a goat that won't shut up. Everyone laughs, whether it's funny or not. You realize that beer has done something profound. It's made people tolerable. You start experimenting. Honey, fruit, different grains. Some results are drinkable, some are crimes. One batch explodes and takes half the storage hut with it. You call it innovation. Future archaeologists will call it evidence of early chemistry. Whatever it is, it's progress. Morning, of course, brings consequences. You wake up with the first hangover in human history. Your skull feels like someone's playing drums inside it. You squint at the rising sun, mutter an ancient curse, and vow never to drink again. A promise that lasts until sundown. You can't help it. It's social, it's cultural, and most importantly, it's liquid. Beer becomes more than a drink. It becomes civilization in a cup. It brings people together, smooths over arguments, and fuels cooperation. The first temples double as breweries. The first taxes are probably collected in beer. Somewhere down the line, a scribe invents math just to figure out who owes what after a particularly rowdy festival. And that's how humanity, in all its glorious foolishness, builds its foundations, not with stone, but with barley. The first written recipes ever found are for beer. The first storage jars? For beer. The first large-scale communal projects? You guessed it, to make more beer. By now you've learned that civilization doesn't need kings or crowns to begin. It just needs a bunch of tired farmers and a reason to sit together at the end of the day without stabbing each other. Beer gives you that. It takes the edge off existence and replaces it with laughter, song, and questionable dancing. As the fire flickers and the stars shimmer over the dark river, you sip the ancient brew, warm, earthy, imperfect, and watch your village buzz with life. You don't have art galleries or monuments, but you have this. People gathered in circles, talking, singing, and spilling their drinks on each other. And you realize something quietly revolutionary. This is how humanity learns to cooperate, to trust, to dream together. The beer might be crude, but the idea behind it, shared joy, shared effort, shared stupidity, is eternal. Tomorrow you'll wake up with a headache and no regrets. You'll haul mud, plant seeds, chase goats, and come back for more. Because in this muddy corner of history, with a cracked clay cup in your hand and laughter echoing off the riverbanks, you've stumbled upon something divine. Not just fermentation, but community. The river is generous but moody. Some days it gives you fish the size of your leg. Other days it gives you crocodiles the size of boats. You've developed reflexes that modern tennis players would envy, and an instinctive distrust of anything that looks like a floating log. Your life as a fisherman begins before sunrise. The air is cool and sticky, filled with the smell of silt and smoke from the dying embers of cooking fires. The Nile murmurs softly beside you, its surface smooth and deceitful, like a god pretending to behave. You push your small papyrus boat into the water, your paddle creaking like an old man's knees. The river welcomes you with a splash to the face, a baptism, or a warning, depending on the day. Fishing here isn't a hobby, it's a gamble where the house always wins. You toss out your woven reed net and watch it drift in the current. Sometimes you catch a bounty of tilapia and catfish so large you can barely lift them. Other times you haul it back up to find a single angry crab glaring at you like it's personal. You sigh and toss him back, muttering that dinner will be thin again. The rhythm of the water dictates everything. When the floodwaters recede, the river leaves behind shimmering ponds and channels, each one teeming with life. Fish trapped in shrinking puddles, frogs singing their last love songs before the mud claims them. You and your fellow fishermen move quickly, spears flashing, baskets filling. You work fast because the Nile's generosity has an expiration date, and the sun doesn't negotiate. Of course, you're not alone on the river. Crocodiles glide through the water like scaly landlords collecting rent. Hippos wallow nearby, grunting disapproval at your mere existence. You've learned to tell the difference between a ripple caused by a fish and one caused by something that could end you. Every splash makes your heart jump. Nature's version of a jump scare. You tell yourself that fear keeps you sharp, but mostly it just keeps you tired. There's camaraderie among fishermen. You share gossip, tools, and trauma. You've all lost nets to crocodiles, boats to storms, and patience to mosquitoes. You swap stories around the fire at night. Tales of monstrous fish that broke through nets, or gods that appeared as glowing lights on the water. Everyone swears their story is true. No one believes anyone else. Your hands are calloused from ropes and salt. Your skin smells permanently of fish and smoke. But there's beauty here too. The way the morning mist hovers above the river like a veil, the way the sun catches the scales of your catch and turns them to liquid gold. In those quiet moments, when the world is still except for the lapping of water against your boat, you feel almost holy. The Nile is unpredictable, but it never lies. Midday brings heat that makes the air shimmer. You beach your boat under a clump of reeds and share your catch with whoever's nearby. Trade, charity, or just superstition. Everyone knows the river gives more when you don't hoard. You chew on dried fish and laugh about the ones that got away, pretending you're not terrified of the ripples just beyond the shore. Sometimes you fish at night when the moon turns the water silver and the world feels suspended between waking and dream. Fireflies blink along the banks, and you listen to the sounds, the croak of frogs, the splash of something big, the hiss of reeds in the wind. It's peaceful until you remember that crocodiles can see better in the dark than you can. Still, you stay. The river feels alive, and you, despite everything, feel alive with it. You've started to see the Nile as a living being, unpredictable, temperamental, but strangely fair. It gives what it takes, and it takes what it gives. Some call it a goddess, others a monster. To you, it's both. You've seen the river flood with such force, it swallows whole villages, and yet, without it, there would be nothing. No crops, no food, no life. As the night deepens, you pull in your final catch, a gleaming fish, twisting in the moonlight. You thank the water under your breath. Gratitude here is survival, not sentiment. You row home, your arms aching, your mind heavy but calm. Behind you, the Nile flows on, silent and endless. Tomorrow, you'll return, because that's what you do. You chase the river's moods, bargain with its dangers, and live off its whims. You'll wake before dawn, smell the wet earth, and push your fragile boat into the current again. You'll pray to no one in particular, but everyone just in case. Because being a fisherman on the Nile isn't just a job, it's a relationship, complicated, codependent, and occasionally violent, but you wouldn't trade it for anything. The Nile provides, punishes, forgives, and forgets, sometimes all in the same day. And as you fall asleep that night, listening to the water sigh against the shore, you realize you're part of something timeless. Long before kings or temples, there were fishermen like you, muddy, stubborn, and hopeful, casting their nets into the same eternal current, trusting the river to remember them. Far upriver in Nubia, strange tombs appear, decorated, organized, almost regal. These people wear crowns, control trade, and bury their leaders with ceremony. You don't know it yet, but the idea of Pharaoh might have started here in the land of Kustal before Egypt was even Egypt. The air in Kustal hums with heat and ambition. The desert burns gold. The river gleams like a blade. And the people here have started to think dangerously big. They don't just want to survive. They want to be remembered. These are the first rulers, not kings as we think of them, but something halfway between divine chiefs and community managers with better hats. They command, they organize, and most importantly, they get buried in style. You arrive at dawn, your boat gliding past cliffs carved by wind and time. On the horizon, A cluster of stone mounds rises from the desert like sleeping giants. They are tombs, massive, deliberate, and full of symbols. Inside, the dead rest surrounded by pottery, jewelry, incense, and maybe a few unlucky servants who didn't get the memo about retirement. There's something new here: hierarchy. People have begun to divide themselves into classes. Farmers plant, craftsmen shape, priests bless, and rulers collect. You can feel it in the air, the invisible architecture of power being built one grain of sand at a time. Somewhere, someone has realized that controlling trade and ritual means controlling everything. The rulers of Kustal wear tall white crowns. Yes, crowns. Centuries before Egypt's first pharaoh will claim the same symbol. Their artisans carve scenes into pottery showing boats, processions, and figures holding staffs of command. You're looking at the prototype of Egyptian kingship, version 1.0. All the future pharaohs are just patch updates of this original design. Trade is the lifeblood of this early kingdom. The Nile is their highway, and they ride it like pros. Incense from Punt, obsidian from Ethiopia, gold from the hills. It all flows north, passing through Kustal like a toll gate with better scenery. These rulers understand something profound. Wealth isn't just about possession, it's about flow. Control the movement, and you control the story. Life in Kustal is sophisticated, but it's not peaceful. Every stronghold wants the same thing: river dominance. Skirmishes break out over fishing rights, trade routes, or most often, bruised ego. The soldiers here fight with spears tipped in flint, their shields made of cowhide stretched tight as drumskin. Victory earns you respect. Defeat earns you a spot in someone else's tomb mural. Despite the heat, the dust, and the endless flies, there's beauty here. The craftsmen of Kustal carve ivory combs, sculpt stone vessels, and decorate pottery with intricate scenes of gods and boats. These aren't mere decorations, they're declarations. Each image says, "We matter." You don't paint stories if you don't believe someone will one day read them. At night, the elite gather in torchlight beside the river. Music hums, drums, rattles, and voices raised in songs that echo against the cliffs. Offerings are made to unseen gods, figures of clay, bowls of grain, and a few splashes of beer for good measure. The ruler sits on a raised platform, silent, distant, glowing in the flicker of firelight. Around him, his people bow, half in devotion, half in calculation. You can almost feel civilization shifting gears as reverence turns into authority. When a king dies, the real show begins. Burial is no longer just a matter of respect, it's a statement. The tombs at Kustal are carefully aligned, filled with treasures and symbols of power. Scepters, pottery, ivory carvings. Each one whispers, "This person mattered more than you." It's a subtle message, very motivational. You help carry baskets of offerings into the burial chamber, the air thick with incense and humidity. The silence is sacred, broken only by the muffled sobs of mourners and the soft scrape of sand under your feet. When the entrance is finally sealed, you realize something chilling. This isn't just about death. It's about immortality through memory. The kings of Kustal are writing themselves into time, one tomb at a time. Centuries later, archaeologists will dig here and find it all: the crowns, the carvings, the echoes of hierarchy. They'll notice the same symbols that appear later in Egypt: the falcon, the staff, the boat. The story will be rewritten to fit convenience, but you'll know the truth. Before the pharaohs ruled from palaces, kings ruled from Kustal's dust. As you sit by the river, watching the sun bleed into the horizon, you wonder how much of this will last. The power, the glory, the belief that kingship itself is divine. You don't know it yet, but this place, this forgotten kingdom of Kustal, will plant the seed that grows into Egypt's might. Soon its influence will fade, its tombs buried, its names erased. But ideas don't die easily. The concept of kingship, of divine rule, of being more than human, that survives. It will sail north with the traders, slip into the temples of Upper Egypt, and one day crown men who call themselves gods. And as the stars ignite over the dark water, you realize the irony. The builders of Kustal, those first kings before pharaohs, may be forgotten by name, but their blueprint for power will shape empires. Every crown, every monument, every god-king who follows will owe a quiet debt to these desert dreamers who dared to build eternity out of sand. In a dusty settlement beside the Nile, people paint animals on walls, carve ivory combs, and decorate pottery with swirling patterns. There are no signatures, no fame, just expression. You dip your fingers in red ochre and leave your mark, because deep down, humans have always loved to doodle on things they shouldn't. Hierakonpolis isn't a city yet, but it's on its way. Mud brick houses rise in uneven rows, smoke drifts from kilns, and the sound of tapping stone fills the air. This is the cradle of art, long before anyone's invented galleries, critics, or funding cuts. You don't make art for money or clout. You make it because there's something in your head that refuses to stay there. You sit cross-legged in the dirt, grinding ochre against a flat stone. The powder stains your hands the color of sunset. You mix it with water and animal fat until it feels right, thick, earthy, alive. The wall in front of you is your canvas, rough, porous, perfect. You drag your fingers across it, tracing the curve of a gazelle mid-run, the spread of a bird's wings. The lines are simple, but the meaning is everything. You're not just decorating. You're capturing motion, spirit, proof that something happened here. Around you, others work in their own ways. One carves a comb from ivory, each tooth precise, the handle shaped like a lion. Another paints swirling designs onto pottery, red spirals, leaping fish, eyes that seem to follow you. None of it is random. These are symbols, early whispers of a language not yet spoken. The stories of the Nile are being told in pigment and clay. The artists of Hierakonpolis are a strange breed. They spend hours hunched over their work, muttering to themselves, ignoring hunger and heat. The farmers think they're eccentric. The priests think they're blessed. You think you're just trying to make sense of a world that changes too fast to understand. Floods rise, rulers die, gods multiply. But paint stays where you put it. Art is the one thing you can control. Occasionally someone stops to watch. Children giggle at your drawings. An elder squints and asks if that's supposed to be a cow or a god. You tell him, yes, because half the time even you don't know. Maybe it's both. Maybe that's the point. The town hums with creation. Potters turn their wheels, weavers twist reeds into mats, and jewelers melt copper until it glows like captured sunlight. Every sound is rhythm. Every movement feels like ceremony. You realize something profound. Civilization isn't just about farming or kings. It's about the urge to make things beautiful, even when survival doesn't demand it. As the sun sets, you walk through the narrow alleys of Hierakonpolis, past walls covered in pigment and smoke. You stop at the temple under construction, just a platform for now, surrounded by poles and cloth. The priests are decorating it with painted jars and carved plaques, each telling a story of the gods, the river, the endless cycle of life and flood. You recognize some of the motifs, a falcon here, a serpent there. They're your designs, or at least your style. You smile. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Even in 4000 BCE, the night air cools, the fires burn low. You sit outside your hut, the smell of clay and ash thick in your hair. You watch as the stars shimmer above the dark curve of the Nile. You think about how fleeting everything feels. The floods, the rulers, the endless rebuilding. But the thought doesn't depress you, because your drawings, your carvings, your lines in the mud, they'll last longer than you. Someone will find them one day, buried beneath layers of dust and time. They'll study your painted animals, your patterns, your scratch symbols. They'll give you a name you never had. They'll call you artist. And you were just a person trying to make sense of the world, to turn chaos into order, mud into meaning. You weren't thinking about legacy. You were thinking about beauty, about the way the curve of a bird's wing feels right when you finally get it. Tomorrow, you'll wake to the sound of hammers and the smell of fresh pigment. You'll grind more ochre, dip your hands into color, and leave new marks where the last ones fade. You'll add to the growing language of shapes and stories that future empires will steal and sanctify. The pharaohs will later claim divine inspiration for their art. But it started here, in the dust, with people like you who just wanted to leave a trace. And as you fall asleep, red-stained hands curled against your chest, you dream of walls that never crumble, of figures that keep dancing long after the dancers are gone. You don't know it, but your art is already immortal, written not in ink or stone, but in the shared impulse of every human who's ever looked at a blank surface and thought, I could make that mean something. At some point, someone decides the flood isn't random. It's divine. The river becomes sacred. The stars above it become prophecies. And you suddenly have a job title, priest. Your duties include appeasing invisible forces and pretending you understand astronomy. Congratulations, you've just invented religion and job security. You didn't mean to start a theological revolution. One day you were a farmer yelling at the river for ruining your barley, and the next people started asking you why the water came early this year. You didn't have an answer, but you noticed something. When you said, because the gods are angry, everyone nodded and brought you fish. That's how priesthood begins, with a good guess and an audience that really wants to believe it. Soon, your mud brick house becomes the local help desk for divine complaints. The floods are late. The goats won't breed. My neighbor's hut smells like evil. You listen, nod sagely, and invent elaborate explanations involving unseen cosmic forces. It's exhausting, but you've never eaten so well in your life. Faith, it turns out, comes with catering. Over time, your role grows more serious. You start noticing patterns in the sky, bright points of light that seem to move with purpose. The stars become your spreadsheets. You track them, chart them, and realize that when certain constellations rise, the river soon follows. You tell the village that the heavens themselves are whispering warnings. You've accidentally invented predictive data analysis, but with more robes. Each night you climb a small platform, your temple, which is really just a glorified sand dune, and announce what the stars told you. People gather in awe, holding offerings of grain, fish, and occasionally things you didn't ask for, like a confused duck. You keep your tone mysterious. The trick to being a priest is to sound confident while knowing absolutely nothing. As the years pass, religion evolves from guesswork to ritual. You organize ceremonies before the floods, urging everyone to sing, chant, and sacrifice something small but symbolically impressive. The first time it works, meaning the river floods at all, people cheer and declare you the voice of the gods. You try to explain correlation doesn't equal causation, but they're too busy dancing. Now the Nile isn't just a river, it's a god. You give it a name, Happy, the bringer of life. And suddenly everything makes sense. The floods are no longer disasters, they're divine visits. The mud that wrecks your hut is now sacred essence. You've successfully turned seasonal chaos into cosmic order. It's your greatest PR campaign yet. Other priests join you, forming the first religious committee, a phrase that immediately guarantees endless arguments. Everyone wants to interpret the gods differently. One priest insists the floods are tears from a celestial cow. Another says they're the sweat of a sky god. You nod politely while secretly thinking, sure, as long as people keep bringing us bread. You build shrines along the river, small altars of stone and clay, decorated with shells and painted figures. Farmers leave offerings before planting, whispering prayers that sound suspiciously like begging. When the crops grow, they thank you. When they fail, they blame you. You're discovering the double-edged sword of leadership. Divine authority comes with zero refund policy, but there's beauty in it too. At dawn, you watch the mist rise from the water, glowing gold under the first light. The river hums, alive and infinite, and for a moment, you understand why people call it sacred. It's not just water. It's memory, rhythm, creation. It gives life, then takes it back. You realize the Nile isn't merely a god. It's a mirror. It reflects humanity's hopes, fears, and endless need to explain the unexplainable. The rituals become grander. You lead processions down to the riverbank, carrying clay figurines, singing hymns that no one fully understands, but everyone feels in their bones. The drums echo like thunder. The children throw flowers into the current. You sprinkle beer on the water as an offering, because apparently even gods appreciate a drink after work. At night, you sit by the fire, watching the flames flicker like stars trapped on earth. People believe you have a direct line to the divine, but the truth is you're still guessing. You're still that farmer staring at the river, trying to make sense of why it loves and hates in equal measure. But maybe that's what faith is, the art of turning uncertainty into meaning. You've taken fear and shaped it into story. You've given people something to hold on to when the floods come too high, or not at all. You've taught them that chaos isn't random, it's divine mood swings. And as you gaze up at the starry sky, you find comfort in your own myth. You've created a world where the river listens, the stars speak, and every flood is a conversation between heaven and earth. It's not science, not really, but it's enough to make life feel less accidental. So you close your eyes and whisper one last prayer, not to the gods, but to the river itself. Be kind this year, because even after inventing religion, you know the truth deep down. It's not faith that controls the flood, it's the flood that keeps faith alive. You meet strangers from faraway villages carrying shiny stones, exotic shells, and questionable hygiene. You exchange your grain for their trinkets. Congratulations, you've just created economics, also theft, and possibly marriage, depending on how bad the trade goes. It starts innocently enough. You're standing by the river one day when a group of travelers drifts in on reed boats, sunburned, loud, and suspiciously friendly. They speak a dialect you barely understand, but the universal language of "look, shiny" breaks the ice immediately. One of them pulls out a lump of copper that gleams like bottled sunlight. You hand over a basket of grain, because in your head, food and glitter must be worth the same. Spoiler, they're not. From that single exchange, a revolution is born. Word spreads that the people upriver will give you beautiful things in return for your boring things. Soon your village becomes a miniature marketplace, the Nile's first proto-economy. You have traders arriving from the south with gold and incense, From the east with shells and stones, from the north with gossip and opinions nobody asked for. The air fills with the hum of bartering, laughter, and occasional yelling when someone realizes they've been scammed. Trade changes everything. It's not just about stuff. It's about stories. You start hearing about lands beyond the horizon, mountains that bleed metal, deserts that whisper, islands filled with birds the size of goats. You meet people with tattoos, beads, and accents that sound like music. For the first time, you realize the world is big and you're part of it. You also realize that every stranger carries two things: opportunity and germs. Of course, trade brings temptation. Someone always wants more than they give. You notice your neighbor's granary looking suspiciously empty, yet somehow his wife has a new ivory bracelet. People begin to argue over who owns what. Words like fair and mine become fighting terms. Congratulations, you've accidentally invented capitalism, greed, and awkward silence at the communal fire. Still, you can't deny the excitement. Every trade day feels like a festival. You lay out your baskets of grain and fish, hoping to attract a buyer with something exotic. A man from far to the south shows you a stone carved into the shape of an animal. Smooth, dark, mesmerizing. You don't need it. You have no use for it. You buy it anyway. It sits in your hut, catching the light, doing absolutely nothing productive. The first luxury item in human history. You've invented consumerism, and it's glorious. Trade also transforms relationships. Villages once separated by silence now depend on each other. You learn to negotiate, to lie politely, and to smile while plotting a better deal next time. You notice that trade makes people civilized and a little sneaky. Someone starts keeping track of who owes what, scratching symbols into clay tablets. The first accountants are born, and humanity immediately regrets it. The river becomes a highway of dreams and danger. Traders vanish. Boats overturn. Goods disappear mysteriously in the night. You learn to guard your stores with vigilance. A trust system lasts exactly one transaction. You start developing laws, or at least shouted guidelines like, "Don't steal my stuff," and "Give that back or I'll hit you with a fish." These primitive rules evolve into justice. Slow, flawed, but better than constant punching. You also notice that trade isn't just about survival anymore. It's about status. The more exotic your possessions, the more respect you command. A man with turquoise beads from the Sinai walks differently, as if he personally invented being interesting. You see envy bloom like algae in the flood season. For the first time, you wonder not just how to live, but how to live better than your neighbor. Civilization is now officially competitive. But there's another side to all this exchange: connection. When the traders sit by your fire at night, telling stories of distant lands, you feel something stirring in your chest. Curiosity. The same spark that drove your ancestors to follow the stars across the desert now draws you toward the unknown. You want to see these places for yourself, to find new things to trade, maybe even new gods to blame when it all goes wrong. As the fires die down, you stare at your new possessions: a carved stone, a necklace of shells, a pot painted with foreign hands. They're beautiful, meaningless, and profoundly human. Each item holds a story, a journey, a handshake between strangers who probably overcharged you. But somehow, it feels worth it. You fall asleep that night, dreaming of distant rivers and lands beyond the horizon. Tomorrow, more traders will come, and with them, new temptations. You'll tell yourself you're only trading for what you need, but you'll end up with something shiny and useless again. Because beneath all the bartering, bargaining, and backroom deals, there's a truth older than history itself. Humans will always trade what they have for what they want, even if they don't know why. And so, as dawn rises over the Nile, the marketplace comes alive again. A chorus of shouting, laughter, and the clatter of clay jars. Civilization has found its heartbeat, the rhythm of exchange, the dance of desire. You adjust your wares, plaster on your best negotiation smile, and prepare to lose money gracefully. After all, it's not just about survival anymore. It's about being part of something bigger, an endless cycle of giving, taking, and pretending you got the better deal. Long before pyramids, there are shrines, mud brick sanctuaries built for reasons no one quite agrees on. Maybe they're for gods, maybe for ancestors, maybe because people got bored of fishing. You help haul stones in the heat, wondering who exactly you're building this for. Spoiler, no one ever agrees. The sun hasn't even cleared the horizon, and already the air feels like it's personally offended by your existence. You wipe the sweat from your eyes, grip the rope, and pull. The massive stone slab lurches forward an inch that feels like eternity. Around you, dozens of others grunt and heave in unison. unison, a symphony of suffering. You're not entirely sure what the finished product will look like, but apparently it's important. That's the thing about early civilization. No one really knows what's going on, but everyone agrees it's sacred. The foreman, a man whose job is mostly yelling, shouts encouragement that sounds suspiciously like threats. "Pull harder, the gods are watching," you mutter under your breath that if the gods want this built so badly, maybe they could lend a divine hand. You immediately look around, just in case lightning has been invented. It hasn't. Lucky you. The structure is growing slowly, a collection of sun-baked bricks, smooth stones, and creative optimism. It's not quite a temple, not quite a tomb, more like a just-in-case building, just in case the gods need a place to hang out, just in case the ancestors get bored, just in case someone in the future wants to know you existed and that you had impressive upper body strength. Each day is the same. You wake, work, sweat, and question your life choices. You haul mud bricks from the riverbank, their weight squishing against your chest. You mix mortar from clay and water that smells suspiciously alive. You balance slabs with ropes and prayers. And yet, as the walls rise, something strange begins to happen. You start to feel proud. There's a rhythm to this labor, a strange peace in the repetition. When you and the others work in sync, it almost feels like music. The thud of hammers, the scrape of rope, the crunch of feet in sand, it becomes a heartbeat. You realize that this, right here, is the first architecture born of collective belief. Not because it's necessary, but because it means something. At midday, you collapse under a patch of shade and stare at the growing structure. The walls are decorated with marks, painted spirals, lines, animal shapes. No one knows exactly what they represent, but everyone pretends to. The priests claim it's divine language. You suspect it's just the artist showing off. Either way, it looks impressive, and that's half the point. As the sun sets, torches flicker against the unfinished walls. The priests arrive, wrapped in linen and mystery, murmuring to the air. They sprinkle beer and barley on the ground, whispering to gods who never answer directly, but seem to have a good sense of timing when floods arrive. You join the others in bowing your head, half in reverence, half because you're too tired to stand. You notice that the temple has already started to change the people building it. There's order now, hierarchy, structure, purpose. Everyone has a role, whether they understand it or not. The builders, the organizers, the watchers, the interpreters. Civilization is crystallizing brick by brick, and this shrine is its beating heart. You don't have writing yet, but this structure is your first story told in stone. Weeks turn into months. The temple rises higher, casting a long shadow over the village. Children play among the scaffolds. Traders stop to stare. The people begin to gather here for more than work, for songs, for rituals, for gossip disguised as devotion. You realize this building is no longer just a project. It's a gathering point, a symbol of unity, or possibly collective delusion. Either way, it works. When it's finally finished, the whole community celebrates. There's music, drums, rattles, flutes that sound like angry birds. The priests chant, the elders cry, and you stand there looking up at the gleaming structure you helped create. It's magnificent, useless maybe, but magnificent. The first rays of dawn hit the polished stones, and for a fleeting second you believe the gods might actually notice. Later, as you sit by the river, exhausted and covered in dust, you can't help but smile. This temple will outlive you, maybe by centuries, maybe millennia. One day, when future generations find it buried in sand, they'll assume gods built it. That's fine by you. Let them think divine hands moved these stones. You'll know the truth. It was sweat, teamwork, and an endless supply of misplaced enthusiasm. And that's the quiet beauty of it. You didn't build this for glory or wealth. You built it because humans can't help but create meaning out of nothing. You built it because deep down, everyone wants to believe that the universe is watching, even if it isn't. As the stars rise above the Nile, you look at your calloused hands and the glowing temple behind you. You laugh softly. Maybe the gods are watching. Or maybe, just maybe, you've become one. A creator of something eternal, hidden beneath the dust, but alive in memory. Rumors spread of great leaders who wear crowns and command floods, their power flowing like the river itself. Some say they're half god, others say they just yell really loud. You start to believe that kingship might not be invented. It might be inherited from something divine. The age of pharaohs is stirring in its sleep. You hear whispers before you ever see a crown. Tales ripple down the Nile of a chieftain upriver who wears white robes and claims the floods obey him. They say he speaks to the gods, that he can command the river to rise or rest. You've seen plenty of self-proclaimed prophets before, but this one feels different. His name travels faster than the current, and people start using it in the same tone they once used for deities. That's when you realize something has changed. Humans are no longer just surviving under gods, they're trying to become them. You're living in an age where power is still experimental, part charisma, part delusion, and part logistics. The strong villages along the Nile are joining forces, merging their crops, their labor, and their belief in one person who claims to understand the divine. He doesn't just lead, he represents. It's unsettling but strangely comforting, as if by obeying him, you're taming the chaos of the river itself. One morning you stand on the riverbank and watch the procession arrive. Dozens of boats glide past, their hulls painted with ochre and lined with reeds. At their center stands the man himself, tall, adorned in gold and linen, with a crown shaped like a conical bowl that somehow doesn't fall off. The crowd kneels as he raises his hands to the sky. You hesitate, caught between skepticism and awe. Then he speaks. Slowly, deeply, with the rhythm of the Nile, and though his words are simple, they carry the weight of centuries waiting for someone to take charge. That's how kingship begins, not with force, but with silence and surrender. People crave order. The river floods when it wants, storms arrive uninvited, crops live or die without warning. But now, there's someone who claims to know why, and more importantly, to fix it. You tell yourself you don't believe in divine rulers, but part of you wants to. It's easier than believing the world runs on chaos and mud. Soon his influence spreads. Messengers travel the river, carrying carved symbols on clay tablets, the earliest attempts at written law. Villages are united under his banner, fields measured, taxes whispered into existence. The word pharaoh hasn't been born yet, but you can feel its shadow forming. The age of tribes is ending, the age of nations is waking. You start to see the first signs of something monumental, literally. Stone markers appear at river crossings, engraved with symbols of power, falcons, crowns, serpents. They say these represent gods, but everyone knows they really represent him. Temples expand, rituals multiply, and with them, the idea that the ruler isn't just chosen by the gods, he is the god's voice made flesh. Of course, there are skeptics. You share beer one night with an old fisherman who grumbles, "If he's divine, why can't he make mosquitoes stop biting?" You laugh, but deep down, you know faith doesn't require logic. It requires spectacle, and the would-be pharaoh understands that better than anyone. When the flood arrives on schedule, he calls it prophecy fulfilled. When it doesn't, he declares it a test. You can't lose when you write the script yourself. His power is contagious. Other leaders start mimicking his rituals, wearing crowns, building shrines, inventing family trees that trace back to the stars. The Nile becomes a chain of small divine franchises, each claiming their ruler was personally approved by the heavens. Rivalries erupt, but something remarkable happens too: stability. Under divine kingship, people stop raiding and start building. Fields stretch wider, granaries fill, and the first hints of empire appear like green shoots after a flood. You watch it unfold from your mud-brick home, banners rising, songs written in praise of men now half immortal. Children are named after rulers, not ancestors. The air feels different, charged with ambition and ceremony. When you look at the stars at night, you wonder if the gods are watching this transformation, amused or impressed, maybe both. In the markets, people trade gossip like currency. "Did you hear?" they whisper. "The king spoke to the river last night, and the water rose." You roll your eyes but still glance at the Nile, just to check. Faith, it seems, doesn't need proof, only repetition. And repetition is what this new era thrives on. Festivals, decrees, and monuments all hammer the same message: the ruler is order, obedience is peace. As years pass, you realize something profound. The pharaohs won't just rule Egypt, they'll define it. The idea of divine kingship will become the backbone of civilization, binding people across centuries. From one man shouting at a river to golden tombs stretching toward the sky, this dream of God kingship begins here, in whispers and superstition, before hardening into law and stone. You sit by the riverbank as dusk falls, the water turning crimson beneath the fading sun. Somewhere upriver, that crowned man is planning monuments. You can almost hear the chisels of the future, carving names into eternity. The Nile flows on, patient as always, carrying rumors and destinies alike. And as you close your eyes, you realize you've lived to see the moment when belief became government, when worship became policy. The age of pharaohs hasn't yet dawned, but you can feel it breathing. The river's reflection shimmers like gold, and for the first time, you whisper to yourself, not in fear, but in wonder, maybe he really does speak for the gods. A scribe-to-be scratches strange marks into clay, lines, dots, animals, ideas captured in mud. You watch him work, not realizing that writing has just been born. Soon, words will outlive people, and history will have receipts. It doesn't look like much at first, just doodles, scratches on tablets, squiggles on pots. You've seen plenty of bored farmers etch stick figures into wet clay before, usually while waiting for the grain to dry. But this feels different. There's rhythm in it, purpose. The young man hunched over the tablet isn't decorating, he's recording. You don't know it yet, but this is humanity's biggest technological leap since fire. Paperwork. The village chief stands behind him, arms crossed, watching nervously as the scribe carves. "So you're sure this will help us remember how much grain is in storage?" he asks. The scribe nods, though he's not entirely sure himself. He presses a small reed stylus into the clay again, marking tiny wedges that supposedly represent 10 baskets of barley. You squint at the tablet and think it looks more like an angry bird that's just been flattened. But somehow, everyone agrees it's genius. At first, it's all practical. Numbers, inventories, trades, who owes what, and who mysteriously forgot to pay their share. Words become the new form of control. You can't argue with clay. It doesn't forget. Suddenly, every transaction leaves a trace, and lying gets harder. People start referring to the scribe as the man who can trap truth in mud. You start avoiding eye contact with him just in case he writes something embarrassing. But the marks spread. Soon, they're not just about grain. They start appearing on temple walls, pottery, even tombs. Someone realizes these shapes can capture not only things but stories. The priests love this. Finally, a way to make their sermons permanent. The ancient version of "Don't forget to like and subscribe." The first myths are carved into stone. Gods, floods, heroes, and moral lessons that may or may not be thinly veiled political statements. The scribe's hands move quickly now, each stroke practiced and deliberate. You ask what he's writing, and he explains, "This one means king, this one river, this one eternal." You nod, pretending to understand, even though it all looks like a family of ducks having a nervous breakdown. Still, there's something hypnotic about it. For the first time, thoughts are being given shape, frozen in time, immune to the chaos of memory. Writing changes everything. History stops being gossip and starts being evidence. The elders, once the keepers of oral tales, are suddenly out of a job. You can see the confusion in their eyes, the quiet panic of being replaced by clay. The scribe, meanwhile, becomes a celebrity. People bring him food, beer, and bribes to record their version of events. You watch him smirk as he carves. Power now lies not in strength, but in symbols. Of course, not everyone's thrilled. Some call it blasphemy, that only the gods should be eternal. Words belong to the wind, one old priest grumbles. They're not meant to be trapped in mud. You can't tell if he's being philosophical or just bitter about literacy being hard. But he's right about one thing. Permanence changes how people think. Once stories can't fade, people start worrying about how they'll be remembered. Reputation is born, so is revisionism. Soon the symbols evolve. What began as simple shapes becomes intricate. Falcons, reeds, waves, and eyes, each carrying layers of meaning. You see them carved into temple walls, glowing red in torchlight. They look alive. Each symbol feels like it's watching you, whispering across centuries. This is no longer just record-keeping. It's magic. Words have become spells, capable of summoning gods, kings, and taxes from the dead. You help the scribe one evening carrying fresh clay from the river. He smiles, handing you a tablet still soft and warm. "Try it," he says. You hesitate, then press the stylus into the surface. The clay yields, and for the first time, you leave a mark that might outlast your own heartbeat. It's a strange feeling, a mix of pride and terror. You've just made yourself permanent. By the next morning, the tablet has hardened in the sun. Your mark remains simple, crude, eternal. You realize the scribe was right. Writing isn't just about remembering. It's about resisting forgetting. Every symbol is a defiance of time, a small rebellion against the silence that waits for everyone. And so, Hierakonpolis and its neighbors fill with marks, thousands upon thousands of them. Some record taxes, some praise kings, some are prayers, a few are probably ancient doodles mocking their bosses. But all of them together form a heartbeat, the pulse of a civilization learning to speak in permanence. You look at the scribe, now surrounded by apprentices. His fingers are stained, his eyes tired but proud. He doesn't know that his invention will reshape the world, that centuries from now, entire libraries will be born from this act of clay and thought. He just knows that for the first time, a person can whisper to the future and be heard. And as you walk home along the riverbank, the sound of styluses scratching clay echoing behind you, you can't help but smile. The world has changed. The river still floods, the crops still grow, the sun still burns. But now the stories will stay. History finally has a voice, and it's written in mud. Night falls over the river. The air cools, the water glimmers like obsidian, and the stars above seem to whisper secrets. You sit by the fire, unaware that you're living in the prologue to history, a story that will echo for thousands of years. The pharaohs will come, but tonight the Nile belongs to you. The day's noise fades into the low murmur of water and crickets. The world is soft now, sand sighing beneath your feet, reeds rustling like distant applause. You poke at the fire absently, sending sparks into the night air, each one vanishing like a thought half remembered. Behind you, your people settle into sleep. The last of the pots are sealed, the tools stacked, the children tucked beneath woven mats. The river hums beside you, patient, ancient, alive. You've worked yourself to exhaustion, shaping mud into walls, seeds into harvest, and words into memory. But in this quiet hour, all that noise, the trade, the labor, the rituals, the endless cycle of floods and rebuilding, seems impossibly small against the backdrop of the stars. The Milky Way arcs overhead, a shimmering mirror of the Nile itself. You wonder if the gods drew the heavens to remind you where you came from, or where you'll return. The fire crackles, and you think about how long this river has been flowing. Longer than the oldest story, longer than memory, longer than anything that calls itself human. Before you, there were animals that came to drink here, beasts with teeth like knives and eyes that soar in the dark. Before them, forests, rain, and time itself. The Nile doesn't just run through the land, it runs through existence. You're sitting beside eternity, pretending it's your backyard. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of silt and smoke. You hear the low croak of a frog, the splash of something unseen, maybe fish, maybe myth. Somewhere downriver, a hyena laughs in the dark, that awful, joyous sound that always reminds you how thin the line is between safety and chaos. You smile faintly. You've survived another day, and somehow that feels like an accomplishment worthy of ceremony. You glance at your hands, rough, calloused, lined with mud and meaning. Every crease holds a story of building huts, of planting grain, of hauling stones for gods you'll never meet. You'll never see the pyramids rise, never walk through the grand temples your descendants will build, but without you, they'll never exist. Every handful of mud you lift tonight is the foundation of tomorrow's wonder. You toss another branch into the fire and stare into the flames. The light flickers across your face, painting you in gold and shadow, like a statue that hasn't been carved yet. You think about the scribe's marks, about the whispered talk of kings and crowns, about how everyone is trying so hard to make the moment last. Maybe that's what being human really is, refusing to let time erase the sound of your footsteps. The river swells softly, licking at the banks, glowing faintly under the starlight. You close your eyes and imagine you can hear it breathing, deep and slow, like the lungs of the earth. You wonder if the river knows what it's doing, how many worlds it has already seen come and go. Maybe the Nile remembers everything, the laughter, the floods, the kings, the wars. Maybe it keeps those memories tucked away beneath the current, carrying them quietly toward the sea. Somewhere in the darkness, a voice begins to sing, low, rhythmic, wordless. Others join in, their harmonies rising and falling with the river's pulse. It's not a song about gods or harvests. It's older than language, older than hope. It's the sound of people acknowledging the mystery they can't explain but can't stop feeling. The melody drifts across the water, up toward the stars, as if the universe itself is listening. You lean back, eyes half closed, the heat of the fire melting into the cool breath of the river. You think about everything you've seen, the builders, the artists, the traders, the priests. They all believe they're inventing something new. But maybe all of this, every brick, every symbol, every dream, has already happened before, countless times, in worlds the river buried and forgot. The Nile is eternal, and you are just passing through. The stars blur. The fire dies to embers. The river keeps whispering its endless lullaby. You stretch out on the warm sand, feeling it cradle you like the earth's own memory. Your eyes grow heavy. The world feels still, not empty, but full of everything that's ever been. And as you drift towards sleep, one final thought hums through your mind, soft as the river's current. Someday, people will stand here again, call this land Egypt, and tell stories about gods and kings and glory. But you, the nameless watcher by the Nile, you were here first. You were the first dreamer by the water, the first to listen to the night and believe it was speaking to you. The pharaohs will rise, the pyramids will reach the sky, empires will crumble into sand. But tonight, before all of that, the Nile belongs to you, quiet, infinite, and full of secrets it will never tell.